Hello there. Welcome to this week's devlog for the ToolDoBox project. This week, I said I was going to tackle projects and project management. And the first thing that I did last week was realize that that was not a two-story project. I basically said this thing should take me like, I don't know, 4 to 6 hours or something like that. And then I went through and I drew out some sketches like this one. And I basically realized, no, it's like, I don't know, probably like 15 to 20 hours or something like that. So I broke it down. First thing I did was I was like, this is just going to be too much. I broke it down into smaller, more manageable pieces. So you can see here, this is one of the sketches. So I was like, okay, first thing I need is one of these pages that just has a list of the projects and will give me the ability to do all sorts of stuff with it. So that's kind of the first thing we got here, which is just a page to view, manage, and create projects. So this is just a page. This isn't the actual functionality of those buttons. This isn't how you interact with them. This is just the thing that displays this stuff. So worked with ChatGPT a little bit, came with some completion criteria for this. And I wanted to make sure, and because I've been using like Copilot and ChatGPT, I wanted to make sure that I could do certain things like one step above like what I would normally do. So I made sure, and this is kind of what I'm going to be doing going forward, is making sure that it's completely accessible. Completely accessible mean like 90% accessible. I'm not going to go like 150%. But I am going to take the extra step to make sure that you can tab through and that all those interactions will work just fine, even for hidden elements and for things that are invisible. And I'll show that in a second. So I wanted to make sure that it's accessible, that you could use your keyboard to interact with it, and you don't need a mouse. So that's one of the challenges that I was like, I bet ChatGPT and Copilot could be really helpful for this. So another thing, page should be responsive. You should be able to see all the projects. They should load from the database. You should be able to see a button to create a new project and the ability to edit and delete a project from the list, and then also be able to go to that project specific page. So that's kind of all I said I wanted to do. This is just a quick sketch of what that might look like. I want to refactor and redesign this a little bit and iterate over this design because it's too similar to other people's stuff, honestly. So let's look at that. Oh, sweet, we can see this over here. So you'll notice, for those of you who've watched last week's episode, I updated all the icons. I forgot that I did that because it was really annoying me, the big bulky thing. I also changed the font size a little bit. This is still bothering me here. So I did also remove the Pomodoro timer section like I said I would. I want to update and refactor this error and confirmation message. We can still create sessions and end sessions with this button. I'm not going to do that because I don't really care. This is the project page. This is what I was telling you that I was going to be working on. So here we got, you can see we can hover over and see which one of these select. You can see that I've been going through and doing lots of tests. I actually had like a whole long list going all the way down here of projects that I trimmed just so that it looks a little bit neater. So you can see we got this. Look, you can press this button. But when you press one of these guys, it opens up the page for that project with that project idea. So that is going to be happening later. But you can see here, look at that, and it's got like a Bezier curve animation and stuff. And I will show you what this button does later. So we can also, look, we can tab through and actually do all of this stuff, even if it's hidden. This was a pain in the butt to figure out, by the way, because when things are invisible, you can't really select them. So that's fun. But yeah, now the whole, and then also I made it, I did fix the rest of the website too. So you'll see the sidebar now. The logout you couldn't have done before with this, so now you can do that. That's nice. So yeah, we got all of that stuff. This is the page. This is, steps forward. So we'll turn that off. Go back here. So the next thing, once I got that done, I was like, sweet, we got a page. We can actually like view and interact and load projects. And those projects, by the way, if we go back here and show you this, these projects aren't just like static HTML elements either. When we go over, let's see if I do this right. Yes. Okay. When we go over here, this is our database, and you'll see we have our list of all of our projects. You have the user ID, the rate that it's been set, the color for it, the ID for the project. So let's see here. Let's delete, which one should we delete? Let's delete testing, and you'll see. So let's first off, let's go back like this. So you can see here, wherever my mouse has been absorbed. So we have testing right here. In theory, when we delete this one, so when this button doesn't work right now, it does nothing. But when we go into the database, which I will show you right here, we will be able to delete it. So we're deleting testing with the black one, it's loading and it's gone. Now, when we switch and we reload this page, boom, it's gone because that was in the database and it's reading from the data. It's so cool. So now that we got that over here, we can keep going. So the next thing, creating projects. That's that little button in the top right. It actually does something, believe it or not. Unlike the edit and delete buttons, which will be a project for this week. So with the creating button process, and as you probably saw in the sketches beforehand, I wanted a modal window to pop up. And so right now, the ellipse button and all of that stuff is being done all in one page. And that's kind of how I started out, was like, okay, everything will just be done in the projects page. Won't have to worry about it too much. So just as a user creating a button to make new projects, again, this process should be accessible. It should be responsive on mobile devices, and you should be able to like open a window, and you should have like clear ways to get out of that window and stuff like that. So you can see this is kind of the sketch I was going for. And then I can actually show you this process. So I'm gonna actually tab into it, and here's our little modal window. You'll see it's actually fairly straightforward, and it has feedback for letting you know. I do want to make more clear feedback on that stuff, so let's give it a hello YouTube. So let's give the YouTube red. It's like somewhere over there. We'll just say $0 per hour because that's what I earn. So you also see, interesting thing here, I don't know if you noticed that or not, this button, you can't press on it. And when you do that, okay, so if I'm over here, if I press this button, it says like, I want more clear error messages. I'm gonna work on that in the future with making a whole form input thingamajig. But you can see when I press this button, it puts me in here and tells me that this isn't filled out correctly. And then once I do fill it out correctly, boom, look, it lets me actually save. So we can also click out here. Anywhere, clicking outside of anywhere over here will exit the modal window. Clicking this little X will exit it. Clicking cancel will exit it. So we have plenty of ways to leave. And you can see the information is still here. But when I press save, it tells me I've created a new project. And I don't like that didn't work the way I expected it to. I'm going to refresh. Look, there it is. It's in our database now. And look, it's got its own new ID. So let's actually go over to our database, and I will show you. Oh, I have to refresh here. Let's see here. Hello, YouTube. There we go. And our color, and our ID, and our hourly rate. So all of that stuff is hooked up and working properly. So that is pretty neato. So you can see that here. I need to figure out, there does seem to be some sort of bug, because when I created the project, it didn't immediately cause the refresh. And I did a bit of refactoring recently, like yesterday, of basically all of the functionality you saw here was all jumbled into 3 files. It was jumbled all into the project file, which had like the modal window was in the project window. It had all these Eclipse buttons, and all of these things were in here. So I basically separated this stuff out, and I'm going to be making it into components and modular system so that it's easier to use going forward. And that kind of segues perfectly into our next topic, which is the style guide. Now this is something I'm kind of proud of, and this is not something that I was planning to build right away. So let's see, style guide. So this is kind of, it's an idea that I kind of got inspiration from a few different sources, but basically, you know, when you're designing websites, a lot of people be like, okay, here's the different types of headings, here's the different types of texts and fonts, and like all of the colors and color palette for the actual website. And what I did is I was like, okay, I want to be able to integrate this into a simple thing that all I have to do is press this and I can copy it to my clipboard. And then when I'm programming, all I do is paste. So, and this will be modular where I'll be able to copy so you can see it actually copied. This is the class, the CSS class for this. Now, not all of it is hooked up, but these stuff are like built in where it'll just like take the colors and I can add new colors to it and it will automatically, all of this stuff is like automatically generated. And so too is the, let's see here. So we can press our thing, get rid of this guy and go to sources, maybe? Elements? There we go, elements, that's what I was looking for. Okay, so you can see all these guys, they have this class called copy name, and then it literally just copies the name that I put into it. So all of this can be created just based off putting in the single color name. Everything is like, it's super clean process. It's basically what I made is all I have to do is put in the root name for it and it generates the whole thing. So all I have to do is press it and it just copies it, which is super fun. I want to do the same thing like buttons I'm currently working through because, and this is like kind of what, as I spent a few hours working on this when I really should have been working on like getting actual things working. But this, once I get it more polished and this is kind of letting me see everything all at once, once I get that kind of, working and a little bit more fluid, I can just, start having that be a much faster process for me to be building the rest of this stuff. So that's pretty fun. It's really helpful so far, and I can't wait to see what else I can do with it. But for right now, let's just keep moving forward. So last week I said I was going to work a little bit more on velocity charts, actually being able to measure how much stuff I'm getting done, how much time it's taking me, versus my estimate and all that sort of stuff. So that has culminated into this spreadsheet of sorts. So this is kind of like a more detailed view of the current project. So you can see creating a page to view, manage, and create projects, and then creating actual projects. And you can see the style guide wasn't actually supposed to be done, but I did spend quite a bit. I actually spent the most amount of time this past week on that style guide. So you can kind of see like how long days-wise it's taken to do these things, how long time-wise it's taken, and then kind of a backlog of all this stuff. And that gives us access to a whole bunch of meta information, which is super fun. So for example, we have, this is just kind of an overview of Sprint. So you can see this is just a screenshot of when I was in progress. So you can see the first week when I was just creating this project last Saturday, only had 32 story points worth of projects to do. And this week, since I went through with the projects, so we'll go back here. So I basically said, instead of create and manage projects, I refactored it to be page to view projects, create projects, edit projects, delete projects, page to view project details. Like all of these things, you can see this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8. 8 project points worth of stuff from a 3 project like story point thing. So I broke that out, and that's why you can see here we actually added basically 13 points worth of stuff to do. And you'll see that reflected in our cool fancy graphs that we can make with this information. So you can see right now, this past week I said I was going to try and do 4 story points worth of stuff, and I did. So you can see that's, if we keep this pace, which I don't think this pace is going to be able to be kept, just because, life. And I've been very fortunate to spend a lot of time this past 2 weeks on it. And you can see here that our amount of work has gone up dramatically. So in theory, as long as we don't keep adding work to do, and we, kind of get to this middle ground at some point, we will eventually complete the projects. It looks like right now we'll hit it somewhere around the 10 to 13 week point, which is kind of my hope, because that was a lot sooner than I was expecting. And you can see here, this is a burn down chart. So in theory, you get closer to finishing the project than when this goes down. You can see we added a lot of work, which is like, you could see that in our charts here. We went from 32 to 45, and you see now we're going from 32 to 41 in terms of what's remaining, what's left. So you can see, in theory, this is supposed to go down, and it's going up. So I think after a few weeks, this thing will kind of even out. So we can take some information, and there's more information after a few weeks that we can gather from this. But we can say right now our total total story points is 45. We've completed 4 of them, so we have 41 left. Pretty basic math. We can see that it's taken me about 3.5 hours per individual story point for the basically 14 hours I spent last week. So we're estimating, based on this, that the project is going to take roughly 150 hours, roughly 155 hours. I think that once I spend a little bit more time and narrow it down, this still seems like a fairly accurate number. However, I think that if I give it a little bit more time, it will start to get a little bit easier. So that is pretty much it in terms of the velocity chart stuff. So we so far, project page was a big one. Creating projects is a huge thing. The style guide is super fun. We can now measure and estimate our progress with this. That's huge. So let's talk about big picture stuff. So hello, big picture. Get it? It's a joke. It's funny. Don't worry about it. So a few things happened this week. I don't know if how connected you are to the AI part of the world. I have become more and more attached to it, apparently. A whole bunch of news and stuff dropped this past week. I've been able to take advantage of ChatGPT 4. It is very impressive. It has saved me a buttload of time when working on this specifically. Like we had, for example, when we were tabbing through all the menus and things were hidden, I kept running into this issue where it wasn't like showing up properly. And I was like, hey, chat, like here's the error message I get. Here's my code for this section. What's going on? And it would give me like 2 or 3 suggestions like, hey, it looks like you mistyped this. And I was like, oh my goodness, I did mistype this. Like I'm making like silly mistakes. And it's able to like go through and just be like, yeah, you did this wrong. You hooked this up wrong. And I was like, okay, thanks. Like this saves me. And like I would have spent probably an hour looking for this thing. I'd give it like 3 minutes to type up its response and boom, saved me a whole bunch of time. So debugging process is super smooth. I can also ask it generic questions like, for example, all the accessibility options, all the different ways that we can escape and navigate through the project page and the project creation process was pretty much automatically generated by ChatGPT. Also, at the end of this week, I went through and created documentation, made it more modular. So now we can take our modal window, which is the creation thing, and we can create different versions of it, and all of that functionality will not have to be recreated every time, which is going to save us so much more time. For example, editing. Editing is going to open up a similar window, but it has different functionality on the back end, but we don't have to copy the code. Like all we have to do is just say like we're creating a new modal window, and we already have all that stuff associated with it. So ChatGPT has been super helpful with that. And same thing with the Eclipse buttons. Like we're making components now. We're probably making it in like, I'm sure there's more efficient ways to make it, but this is just how I know how to do it, and I want to do it. So I'm doing it this way. So what does this have to do with the actual big picture of the project? Well, I realized that basically we're hitting this point now, and we've been doing this for multiple years now, where this is a productivity tool, right? Like ToolDoBox at its base is a productivity-based tool. It's about how much time and focus energy you're spending on projects, being able to figure out what's the most valuable of your projects to work on, and giving you the tools necessary to figure out what you either need to cut, how you can spend less time doing more things, what's important for you to work on. So these are the kind of questions that this project is supposed to be answering. And I realized that every time tools like this come along, and in the past 20 to 30 years, you can kind of see it, we've become increasingly more productive with these tools at the cost of the people using them most of the time. It's the people who like implement and create the tools, like for example, like a business or what have you, right? If ChatGPT enables me to do 10 times the code and do like 10 times better, finding errors in 3 minutes instead of an hour, I'm not getting compensated for that difference, if that makes sense. Like I'm suddenly now just 10 times more productive, getting paid 10 times less for what I'm doing. And that's kind of, for me, like we don't have an answer to this question yet, because there's not really a good way to answer it yet, unless you were to suddenly start getting paid based on what you actually complete, and then can you complete faster? And it's going to take a while for people, businesses to adapt to these types of changes, and we likely won't see that type of compensation shift. So this made me think, I'm making a tool to enable people to be more productive, and to identify patterns with their focus energy, with that stuff. So what I really need, and this is kind of stepping back to why I made the shift a few weeks ago towards this model and not what I was going to work on. So if you want to check the past couple weeks, there was a shift and a redesign. So what I decided this week, and what I think is going to be important going forward, is that this tool has built-in ability to help out on like wellness, help out on being able to take actual breaks, because that's kind of one of the ideas, is that like with the Pomodoro bar, being able to balance your productive energy and your diffuse mode so that you can solve problems better, that you aren't overworking yourself, you're taking breaks, you're doing things healthily, because ultimately that's the best way to be productive. And I saw, and this is kind of where I got a little bit worried, with all the chaos going around with the AI world right now, with, for example, Microsoft Copilot and all the rest of that stuff. I basically said, like, if I'm going to make this tool, if this tool ever becomes public and someone uses it, they have the power to use this tool negatively, in the sense that, like, they can use this tool and they use the concepts and things that I'm working on right now as a detriment to just people. I saw like there, this idea came to me, and I was like, I don't know how to deal with this. Like, imagine someone goes through, takes the same project idea, which is basically tracking your time with each individual task, figuring out how you can get better at doing each task, and then figuring out how much that task is worth, whether or not to do that, being able to track as your focus time versus break time. This is stuff that can really enable you as a user and like as an employee to have more balance and to make sure that you're focusing on what you want to focus. Like, for example, a solo business entrepreneur, their time is very valuable to them because, they don't have other people to delegate this stuff to. So they need to be able to determine, like, okay, spending this time on email isn't worth, like, they need to be able to see that. Like, I'm spending 30 minutes a day on email over the course of the week. That's, what is that? 3.5 hours, something like that. So you're like, that's not giving me as much as actually working on this stuff. So maybe I need to cut down on this. So like those types of insights can be good for the right type of person. Now you take that same tool and put it in someone else's hand, and now you have the ability to micromanage. This is like the ultimate micromanaging device, is basically what I'm creating. And I don't want this to become a negative. So what I want to do, big picture, this is kind of where this whole thing is, and I don't know yet how to implement this, but adding wellness, adding basically breaks and building into that. To me, a big part of this project is being more productive so that you can focus your time on the important things and focus your time on the stuff that you want to do, like getting your work done and not having to think about it, so that you can go and enjoy playing games more or be with your friends and do all that stuff, right? Because this is kind of what, to me, has always been like kind of that stepping stone. And for me, I enjoy this. So for me, this is my enjoyment time, is I work harder so that I can have time to work on this type of stuff, to think about how I can free up more time and energy to do what I enjoy. So now there's this perplexing issue of what can this tool do and become a stable sense of sustained productivity. This isn't supposed to create some micromanaging tool that crushes people. It's supposed to be able to make space for sustainable work. Because ultimately, if you were to take a step back, there will always be more work than there will be human hours to consume that work. That's how I view it. There will always be more homework that can be done, more studying, more art to create. There can always be more papers to file. And I think that at some point, you have to realize that pushing yourself to keep doing this endless cycle isn't going to get it done. You have to basically eliminate things, delegate things, automate things, and build in more time and wait and certainly delay certain things rather than just trying to do everything at once. And that's kind of where, and I'll bring this up. Let's see here. I'll bring this up because I think it's interesting is I have been working on kind of, this isn't really a book idea. Maybe it is a book in the future. Principles of efficacy. This is efficacy means getting things done. This isn't efficiency. This isn't getting things done faster or better or whatnot. This isn't like it's, the idea is that you are getting things done, completed. And that's kind of me as like, I'm no longer a perfectionist. I've realized there are better ways to do things which involve less effort. So this is kind of a whole bunch of principles and ideas that are consistent throughout the productivity genre. 80-20 principle is a big one. Automation, breaking bigger tasks down to smaller tasks, getting clarity on projects, cleaning workspace, conscious decision making is a huge one. Delegating things, eliminating low priority stuff, energy management, working with your energy. If you're most productive in the morning, those 2 hours are worth more than every other hour in the day. So how do you prioritize and make sure that people don't use that time? So these types of hints are laid out through so many different books. And ultimately, after you read more than, I would say, 3 to 5 books, once you read your 6th book on productivity, you realize that everyone is saying the same thing and focusing on different parts of it. And once you realize that, you can start to take a more abstract, larger view of what it means to be productive and what you need to do that. So that's kind of been, this is a meta project for me, is what are the tips, techniques, and principles that are consistent throughout the entire productivity world genre. And I've been using, so these are just a list of the books that I still have left to that I have not started yet, that I've already read once, and we'll go back with ChatGPT and abstract the higher level principles and ideas. And I feel like this list could be forever long. But I think at some point, after you read, however many books, like for example, like most of these books over here, I've already read all of these. And this is just from the list of books that I've read. So I've still got a whole bunch more that I want to read and want to dissect. But a lot of these things are pretty much the same information over and over again by a different author. And I think that AI, as scary as it is built as a sword to chop through information, summarize and synthesize information. And I think that's what we really need with this type of genre is, and I feel like all genres are kind of in this way with the science world, is where we have kind of like these consistent principles that keep popping up, just in different words and different ways. So if we can abstract those out and say okay, let's follow these rules, follow these principles and stuff, where does it lead us to? So that's big picture, the principles of efficacy. And that's kind of where I was said, so bringing this back to the point of how do we make it sustainable? Well, so this is how we be productive. I also feel like I need to go on the same type of meta adventure for sustainable and wellness and going through at a healthy pace. Because I think these things are kind of intertwined at some point, because the healthier you are and the more content you are with the work, the more and better work you can do, and then kind of feedback and back. So how do we integrate these things? How do we build the ultimate tool to build sustainable and healthy work? That's the question now, where I'm well, we started with the best micromanaging tool that you can make to kind of give you insights on what's important and what's not important to work on and all that sort of stuff. Now, how do we also leverage this tool and build in blocks that prevent people from using this to cause more harm to the people working, and actually build in wellness and stuff? Because that's what we need now. That's the next step of this. So that's kind of big picture. I can think of a few different ways of how I can start implementing this thing, but ultimately it's you build the drug, and if someone abuses it, that's kind of the culture that is built around. So how do we build in blockers and stuff to prevent it from being easily abused? Those are the questions I'm going to start struggling with and start thinking about as a meta idea with this project, because it's concerning to me. And I know we're already crazy time. I spent half of this on theory and stuff. So that's basically where I'm thinking of taking it. I've got a few ideas. So one of them, as I've discussed before, is encouragement and like being able to keep track of your successes, which you can use for example, like being like, okay, here's what I got done today, making that very clear and being like, this is what I want to get done today. So I've got some ideas with that. Also, other things like you can see a lot of to-do apps. If you use to-do apps, a lot of them, once you finish your list, they'll give you some sort of like, nice job, enjoy your day, relax a little bit. Or you'll have like little things like, I know Todoist has once you complete seven things for the day, it's like, nice job on completing your daily 7. Now make sure you take a break or something like that. So it's like they build in these small, subtle ways to encourage that type of behavior. But you also have things like, for example, like Clockify is one that I use where it's a time tracking thing, and you can just so easily be like obsessive about the numbers, and that kind of comes down to the personality. Another one that I've used, Rescue Time, is built in setting a goal for how much focus work you want to do in a day. I like that concept. And after using it for a little bit, there's some things I'm kind of not so sure about. But overall, like the approach that they take to calculate and do productive time, I kind of struggle with sometimes. But I think the overall concept of being like, you should expect in your day to try and make time for 2 productive hours. You should realize that meetings are going to take up this much of your time, and that over here is going to be your diffused work. Like making sure you realize that a productive day does not look like sitting down focus work 24/7. Because I think that's an idea that I had that is not true. So yeah, that's kind of big picture some of the stuff I want to look at. So going forward, so this is last week's to-do list, and I'll go over what's going on this week. So last week, I cleaned up the Pomodoro timer. Instead of implementing the project management system, I broke it down into basically 6 tasks. I got 2 of them done. I'm going to work on the other 3 this week. And then I didn't have time to implement Jest. I did clean up a lot of the CSS and Pug stuff. I did create a Figma prototype, but ultimately I found that it was kind of a waste of time, considering that I have the ability to create modular systems and actually implement them and be able to play with that. So I feel like my time is better spent if it's not like a super easy sketch. Prototyping and all that stuff, because I'm the one to implement it, I don't really need to prototype it, and because I'm not checking with anyone else, I feel like it's becoming a waste of time. I don't want to spend a whole bunch of time building diagrams when I don't need to. We have the velocity measuring system, and we created the style guide with something added here. So this week, deleting projects, I feel like that's one story point. We already have the button to do it, and I think all it's going to really be is hooking up the backend stuff and adding a like, are you sure you want to delete this project type of thing? And part of me is wondering, do we need archiving of projects? Because projects contain a lot of data, they spend a lot of time and energy, so they're worth some value to have, even to reference an old project. But you do want to clean up your space. Right now, I don't want to implement an archive system because that might be twice as difficult as implementing a deleting system. It might be something I need to revisit in the future. So maybe archiving projects is a future thing. But right now, I just need to be able to delete projects. Editing projects too, now that we have a modular modal window, we can just edit that for editing projects, and we already have the backend stuff set up in place for that. Project page, so when you click on a project, as you saw, it just leads to the ID of that project. We can now turn that into a page and do stuff with that. Making the files modular, there's a few things that haven't been turned into modules yet, like certain types of buttons and stuff and input fields and whatnot. For form validation, I want to do that a little bit more and basically make everything into little components that I can just copy and paste everywhere. And then I do need to create project tests. I've been meaning to do this because right now manual testing is taking a little bit of time, and I don't know if I broke something, and it's a little bit hard because most of the stuff I'm dealing with right now is UI based. So it's hard for me to be like, I have to like manually test every time I make some big change to see whether or not I like broke something. So figuring out some sort of automated testing system would be great. I know this has been a crazy long episode. I do apologize for that, but I do think that everything in this episode was kind of important to be discussed and brought up, and there's more things that I definitely could have talked about, because this was a long week. This was like 14 hours of work plus like more thought that I've put into it this week. So there you go. There is this past week. Next week we'll just see what happens. I might not get all of this stuff done. I might, because I've got finals this week. But you know, who knows? Maybe I have more spare time than I think. So we'll see. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.